Welcome to episode 2 of Hard Truths with Hardy, where you're going to hear the hard, cold facts, even if you don't want to hear it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm really not that bad. But today we're going to talk about house hunting with couples when they're not on the same page. Before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about my week, what it's looked like. I've had a great week. I've had a couple listing appointments. I've been out twice to meet with a local builder, Worley, with a client that's thinking about building kind of what you would call their retirement home. And we've been looking at the different options, the different floor plans with them. So that's been a lot of fun and planning, getting their house on the market. And then I've also had some things going on. I'm the president of our Women's Council of Realtors locally. So we had our past presidents lunch on Wednesday. That was a lot of fun. I think it's important to, as Mr. Sam at Walmart used to say, steal shamelessly others' ideas. To me, that's kind of a compliment when you talk to other people and you can take the ideas that they've had and implement those in your business and make it better. So our past president's lunch was really good. I asked them for some feedback on things we're doing here with our local chapter, and I got some really great ideas that we actually put into action that same evening. And then yesterday, I went to a committee meeting for our fundraiser that's called Bourbon Bubbles and Bingo. It's the first time we're doing it this year. I'm super excited about it. I love doing bingo. We do it with our clients a whole lot as a client appreciation event, but this one's going to be with the Women's Council of Realtors. It'll be open to anybody to come to. We're going to have a bourbon pull. If you don't know what that is, essentially you buy a ticket, and let's say your ticket's $50, you're guaranteed that you'll get a bottle of bourbon that costs at least that much, but it may be a $200 bottle of bourbon. You may get a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle, you never know. So you're guaranteed that you'll at least make your money back on the bourbon. It's a lot of fun. I had my hair appointment. Hair's one of those things I think that makes you either feel really good or pretty cruddy. I have 2 different hairstylists. That probably also sounds nuts. I've been going to Tina for 25, 26 years, ever since I moved to Knoxville. She's wonderful. She does my hair color most of the time, which if she didn't, I'd be gray, let's be honest. My mom turned gray early, or not my mom, but my dad. My mom did not have gray hair, but my dad did. I'd be like him and have gray hair too if I didn't color it every 3 weeks. I went to get my hair colored and cut, and she fixed it and she curled it, and I felt like little orphan Annie. So yeah, I made a second hair appointment with my other lady, who sometimes does my color, but she always does my blowouts. So yeah, that's probably kind of crazy and people would think I'm nuts. But I feel like if you don't feel good, then, your day's just not going to go right. So yeah, a couple of my friends laughed at me yesterday that I went to the hairdresser twice and got my hair done twice in one day. I've never done that before, in all transparency. That's the only time I've ever done that, but it was enjoyable. That's kind of how my week has looked. Our team's had some crazy situations come up, but nothing that we could not handle. We've had a sale that fell through due to some cross-space issues, but most of our transactions are flowing along pretty seamlessly like they always do. So let's get into our topic today, house hunting when the partners don't agree. When the wife and the husband or the 2 partners can't agree on what they want, it happens more than you would think. Pretty often, I'll have a phone call to get everything started with the client, and they'll tell me what they're interested in. One or the other of the spouses, and they'll give me a list. Oh, I want to live on 2 or 3 acres, and I want to be able to have chickens. Everybody here wants chickens. I don't get it, but whatever. If you want chickens, we'll find you a place for chickens. So they'll give me their list, and then they'll say, let you talk to my wife. Okay. And then the wife gets on, and she says, I want to be close to Trader Joe's and Costco and all the things. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't know how we're going to marry those 2, because in Knox County, you cannot find 2 acres anywhere near a Costco or a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods. That's just not happening. Land is not plentiful in Knox County, and if you want land, you pretty well have to go out of the county to the outskirts in order to find it. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get people on the same page. Pretty frequently, I talk to new clients who don't necessarily have the same idea on what they want, or maybe they don't even realize that what they're wanting is not aligned with what their spouse wants. What I try to do is have people sit down and make a list. Wants and needs. Because there's lots of things we want, but not necessarily that we have to have. So, for example, I've always wanted an in-ground pool. I'm yet to ever have one, so that would be a want, not a need. But I definitely need to live close to my work, and that's important to me so that I can get to those appointments quickly. And that's how we specify those. So when I get a client and they call me and they don't seem to be on the same page at all, and I'm trying to structure their house search, that's the first thing I do. It's really important that we make a list of what we absolutely have to have, and we'll start your search there. And hopefully we'll find some of those wants in addition to the needs along the way. It's also helpful to just take them out and go look at a couple houses first thing. A lot of people move to this area and they've never visited Knoxville. They have no idea what it looks like. So frequently people will say, I have to be near Costco, I have to be near Trader Joe's, but they want, acreage, and that's just not possible. Land is not plentiful here. I wish it was. But that's probably the biggest challenge we face with out of town, especially people coming from California, and they think that land is going to be in abundance in Tennessee. And it may be in other places, but it's not in Knox County. If you're willing to move to Rutledge or Blaine, maybe Clinton, you can get land, but you can't get it in Knox County. And you can't get big lots either unless you're willing to buy an older home. Another challenge when people are house hunting is that not everybody has the same goals in mind about buying a house. Maybe one spouse is ready to buy a house and the other isn't there in the relationship. So they're trying to push the other one along to get there. That can be a little bit of a challenge. Additionally, sometimes they have different budgets in mind. For example, the wife wants is a little more expensive, and maybe the husband wants to be a little more frugal and responsible with their money. Not to say that that's the gender roles that it has to be, but sometimes they're not on the same page with the budget and what they must have. A lot of times people want a house that's bigger than what they have to have, and that's okay, but occasionally we have to scale it back to get it in the budget. It helps to get out and look at a house or two to give them an idea of what is realistically in their budget. And then once we do that and they have an idea of what's available in their price range, what's available that's on their wants list, then it helps them to step back and reassess, okay, all right, maybe we're not going to quite get what we thought we could for the price that we wanted to get it for. Sometimes people will call and they're talking about the next step in their relationship. Maybe they've been dating and they're ready to live together and they're trying to decide if they want to get an apartment or take that next step and move in together. Now, everybody has different thoughts around when is the right time to make a purchase together. And my thoughts are not necessarily what's right or wrong for everybody. I tend to be a little more conservative where things like that are concerned. I'm not real big on putting my name on purchases where you have to get a loan with somebody else unless we are 100% committed. Because I firmly believe the person you're dating or the person you marry is not going to be the person that you divorce or break up with. And they may become a completely different person than what you expect them to be. And I think you have to be ready for that. When you break up or when you divorce, it's probably going to get ugly, or it could potentially get ugly, especially when it comes to the division of assets. So I tend to be a little more conservative than most people about putting my name on something with somebody else. That's not right or wrong. Everybody has their own way. So, my thought process around that is just make sure you're really sure. And I think it's okay to have a discussion up front. What if we don't work out? How would we work out this house situation? Would one or the other of us be able to afford it on our own and take over the house payments and pay out some of the equity to the other partner? I think those are good discussions to have up front that don't often happen before a house purchase. Discussing that could save you some heartache in the long run. Financial discussions are important when you're thinking about committing your life to being with somebody else. And we all know divorce happens. In fact, it happens pretty frequently. So I think it's a good idea to be safe and prepared. When people call me and they're having those kinds of thoughts. We do get out and start their house search, and along the way we have some discussion to make sure they're ready to make that big step and get a home together. And sometimes they decide maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe we should just rent, because that's a little bit easier to get out of than signing on the dotted line for a mortgage, and that's okay. I'll never fault anybody for deciding that this isn't the right time and that we need to take a step back, and I understand that. I had a client just this morning call me from out of state that was wanting to move to Knoxville, and when they assessed their situation, where they're coming from, they realized they'd be upside down on their home, and they wouldn't have enough equity in it to sell it and cover their costs and have any down payment. So they've decided to wait until the market's a little better and they have some more equity in order to move. That's totally understandable. But it is smart to have some discussions and try to get on the same page before you make a major purchase like a house. It's the biggest purchase you'll ever make, so you definitely need to spend some time with those discussions. Remember, communication on big things like a major purchase, such as a house, that is completely normal. And sometimes those communications may get a little bit heated. Hopefully they don't, but I wouldn't get discouraged if they do. I don't think people have made it normal enough to have those types of discussions, but it's very smart to have them before you get into a situation that's really hard to get out of. We're going to close out our podcast today with some questions from our viewers and listeners that were submitted through social media. The first one is, what's the pettiest thing you've ever seen kill a deal? Well, I had an occasion where sometimes the seller thinks they need to be there. Not a good idea at all. It makes the buyer really uncomfortable. But the seller was there, and quite honestly, my buyer just didn't like the seller. It wasn't that they didn't like the house, but they didn't like the seller. So then they were turned off from the whole thing, and they didn't want to fool with that house. The house perfectly fit their needs, but they didn't want it because they didn't like the seller. And guess what? I can't bring them back from that. I don't think it's a good idea for the seller to be present. Keep that in mind if you get ready to sell your house. You want people to come in and be completely comfortable looking at your house and imagining themselves in it, not you. You're moving, right? All right, what else have we got? Have I ever had a client cry during a showing? I had a lady that was a first-time buyer, and she was older than your normal first-time buyer. She thought she'd never be able to buy a home. And it was something she had discussed with her kids growing up, that one day she wanted to be able to provide her own home. And her daughter, her oldest daughter, had told her that when she became of age and had a job and had some money, that she would help her. So when the daughter called me initially, we thought the house was going to have to be in both the daughter and the mother's name. Well, subsequently, after going through the lender, we found out the mother qualified on her own. In itself, that was exciting because she never thought she'd be able to buy a house. She thought she'd have to buy it with her daughter. Well, we found her a house, a really nice one. It was, an older home that had been remodeled and done really, really well. She was so excited that she was going to be able to buy her first house. And she was probably late 40s, early 50s. That to me meant a whole lot, to see somebody realize the dream of home ownership. So yeah, she cried when we went to look because she got so excited that she was going to have her family in a house that she owned. And the house they were renting at the time, the HVAC hadn't worked in 2 years, so they hadn't had heat or air conditioning. I couldn't imagine being in a cold winter with no heat. So yeah, that was pretty exciting for me, and she did cry, but it was happy tears. We've got one last question. Have I ever pretended to like a house? Well, if you know me very well, and some of you don't, but you may get to know me a little better here on this podcast, I'm not really a big pretender. But what I've decided to do, if I don't like something, I have to really remind myself that my taste isn't everybody's taste, and that's okay. I'm here to look out for my client's best interest. So if it's not something I personally like, I just keep my mouth shut. I talk about the facts, the condition of the home. I still try to look out for their interests, but they don't need to know, hey, Gail wouldn't live here, because that's not what's important here. What's important is they find a house they like, that's in good shape, and we get them a good value. It's not always important if I like it or not, but I'm not going to pretend, I promise you that. Thank you for joining us on our podcast here today, Hard Truths with Hardy. Hopefully, the hard truths weren't too hard anyway, and we look forward to you joining us again for podcast 3. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, or on YouTube. See you soon.